Alright, it's Mate Redacted. The recent release of the new Nvidia graphics cards, which I like to call it the fake it until you make it graphics cards, shows that technology is moving on. Perhaps not as you'd like it, with a paper launch and fake frames instead of real significant performance improvements, but this got me thinking, will the technology leaps in the open world games be as disappointing or as small as these graphics cards? Or will there be cool new innovations that we haven't even thought of yet? What will the future of open world games look like? Will it all be ruined by soulless AI? Will Todd Howard be kept in stasis like Mr. House so he can release The Elder Scrolls 7 in 2069? I will answer at least one of these questions today. Please subscribe. I want to focus on AI first, mainly because I personally think that AI is a bubble, and also I just want to get it out of the way. I'm not one of those people who think that AI will take over the world, although non-subscribers will not be allowed in the Mike-redacted end of the world bunker. I just think that AI is the hot new thing, and then people will soon realise that consumers don't need AI to be crammed into absolutely everything as it is right now. An AI badge for your jacket even though you have a phone in your pocket, AI in your fridge. AI is in everything these days. The bubble's just gonna burst and a whole load of people are gonna be left holding the bag, losing a lot of money. I do think that AI has cool potential for games, but just because it can be used for something doesn't mean it should be used all the time, as it is right now. There's no doubt that with the current trends, we are likely to see the use of AI in games significantly increase, and that's something I'd probably bet my house on. I think a good example of what AI could be used for, and something that we will see in the future, is generating dynamic voice dialogue in open world games. And by that I mean the AI has someone's voice and they see the player do something and they can dynamically generate a voiced line that nobody sat in a recording booth and actually said. It's something tailored specifically to the player. This could be very cool, and the NPCs could make comments about the player's actions or even what they are wearing without it being like a generalized statement. The NPC could make a statement which is tailored to that specific player's actions. Instead of saying something like, "Nice job clearing that dungeon," the NPC could instead say, "Impressive that you managed to clear that dungeon with broken armor and just an axe." The AI voices obviously come with some problems that need to be resolved. For one, the voice actors are protesting the use of AI voices in movies and video games, as they believe that AI will destroy their industry and essentially put them out of a job. I believe that this could be resolved by the voice actors selling the rights to use their voices for the project instead of actually sitting in the booth and voicing the lines themselves. The voice actors are also rightly concerned about what their voice is going to be used for. For example, if I bought the right to a voice actor's voice, I could make them appear to say something like, "The solution to fixing all of Scotland's problems is to nuke Cumbernauld." Although it does look like Cumbernauld has already been hit by a nuke, I think this is something that again needs to be worked out at a contractual level, where the voice actor is allowed to set parameters of what can and can't be said with their voice. You may not like it, but AI is going to be used for other things too, such as level design and also for writing quests. I expect more games will have a system like Bethesda's Radiant Quest system. Hopefully, as AI becomes more complex, these quests will transform from "another settlement needs your help" to something actually substantial. These AI quests could even be tailored to the player and how they are playing the game. I believe that Todd Howard once said that he envisions a time where the player will not be able to tell the difference between a quest generated by the Radiant AI system and a quest written by actual writers. Whether this is due to the writing getting worse or the AI getting better is still out for debate. For better or worse, AI is here to stay in the gaming industry for now and into the future. Like a parasite clinging to the eye of a Greenland shark, there is no viable way of getting rid of it right now. Contrary to what my first girlfriend told me, size actually does matter, at least when it comes to open world games. As I outlined in a previous video, open world games can sometimes prioritise size over details, which can make for a boring open world. We can see this in the example of Starfield, where the open world is absolutely massive, but it's about as exciting as a kick in the nuts. In the future, I believe that whilst the map sizes will not significantly change in size, the playable area of the games will increase. Shops and buildings which are once just a texture on the side of a cube will become shops and buildings which the player can actually enter. This will give more opportunities for interactions between the player and the game world. I have no doubt in my mind that a developer somewhere out there has seen Bethesda make an open world game with over 1,000 planets, and now that developer is attempting to make an open world game with 2,000 planets or even more, just to one up Bethesda in some sort of planet dick measuring contest. There will be developers in the future who try and make their open world games bigger and bigger, but we can only hope that these colossal worlds will somehow be interesting, or if they're not interesting, that those developers finally get the message that we want quality over quantity when it comes to their open worlds. Procedural generation isn't always a bad thing when it's used sparingly, but developers need to realise that players want bespoke worlds with a human touch. Whole worlds made with procedural generation are bloody boring. Leave procedural generation to games like Minecraft, where Mojang has put lots of time into getting the world generation to a good state, and where the gameplay loop is actually centred around surviving and thriving in the randomly generated world. To build on a point that I made in the last section, I predict that open world games of the future are going to take interactivity to the next level. This seems to be the trend of the industry so far as I can remember at least. Games which stay at the same level of interactivity will start to feel dated and will die. Bethesda will die if they do not innovate and do not add new opportunities for the players to interact with the game world. What people seem to forget is the open world itself is a character of the game. It does not audibly speak, and it does not directly send the player on any pointless quests, but it's still a character. It conveys messages to the player through conditions and changes of conditions in the environment. The placement of in-game objects can be used to tell a story. In future open world games, the world itself will become highly reactive to the player's actions. The consequences of quests and decisions that the players make will be displayed in the world more and more frequently. A good games developer could even make the economy react to the player, making frequently sold items by the player less expensive as the market is flooded with stock. No longer will you be able to cheese the crafting or alchemy system to make millions. These reactive worlds will make every playthrough of the game feel unique and will present new challenges and opportunities to the player every time they play. You may have noticed that new games often come out in a terrible state. Bugs, crashes, and sometimes even the blue screen of death. This trend's not going away. Expect it to get worse. Big games companies have worked out that people will still buy their game even if it releases in a terrible state. Unless you have the latest PC hardware, expect games to run like crap on launch. Sid Meier's Civilization 7's recommended specs for 4K includes a 20 core processor, 32 gigs of RAM and at least a 4070. And I know you most likely don't have a 4K monitor, but a lot of people now have a high refresh rate 1440p monitor. It's kind of regarded as the sweet spot. You won't need the 4070 or the 20 core CPU to get all those 144 FPS at 1440p, but you'll still be needing some pretty powerful hardware to get all of those 144 frames that you bloody paid for. Hardware that most people simply do not have. There's going to be a large amount of people who are going to just be unable to play new games without playing on low settings or cranking their resolution down a couple of notches. To me, turning on DLSS also counts as turning down your settings, as that's kind of what it is. DLSS is a software trick where your game is rendered at a lower resolution and then the image is upscaled in real time. So technically, you're running the game at lower settings. I recently saw a video on YouTube about how EAFC, which is basically just the continuation of the FIFA series, will have an open world component to it. Now I needed to go and have a look in the mirror after hearing that to make sure I wasn't tripping, and I don't actually know if it's 100% true or if it's just a rumour. There are not many games in existence that do not need an open world aspect to it more than EAFC. I don't really know how an open world plays into EA's scheme of convincing players to buy as many packs as possible with their parents' credit card, but who knows, it might work well, and I may end up eating my words. Maybe EA will convince me to buy packs with my own card too. This is just the start of a trend which I think is coming, where we'll see more and more games have open world aspects which you would have never thought possible. I mean, we even saw open world style levels in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. There are so many action games which benefit from being linear. If I go to the dentist and I need a tooth removed, I don't expect my dentist to use a crowbar to remove it. It's not the right tool for the job. Similarly, an open world is not the right tool for the job for telling the story of some of these more linear actions and sports games. Linear games can be great because some of the stories really benefit from having the pacing of a linear game or the storytelling aspects of a linear game. In an open world game, you might go off and do side content for a few hours before coming back to the main story, and that kind of defeats any feeling of tension or urgency which the story is trying to convey. If you can just suspend the story for several in-game days or weeks, it doesn't really feel like anything's urgent. Expect to see some of these games which try and morph into open world game formats fall flat as they attempt the open world, but also expect to see a few flourish and cool and new experiences will come out. It's a mixed bag, but ultimately I think it will be quite interesting to see it all unfold, and it might just be worth it for a couple of laughs. Indie games will continue to put AAA studios to shame. Even with less time, less resources and less of a budget, some indie games still manage to be much better than any of the AAA games which take 4 years and $50 million to develop. This is because indie developers have passion, and this makes them put their soul into their games. When you play some AAA games, you really can feel how trapped and hopeless the developers feel in their wage cage. I too am in the wage cage, and I can assure you that it's not fun at all. I think there could be some cool new mechanics and features that come from the indie game space in the next 10 years. I'm not able to extrapolate on these features, as if I knew exactly what cool or new features were coming, then I'd be putting them into a game of my own creation, or at least selling them to some other game studio. To recap my predictions: more AI, the world size divide. Open worlds become ultra interactive. Open worlds will become more reactive to the player. Your games will still not be optimized on release. Established games become open worlds to great and mixed success. Indie games will continue to beat AAA games. Things are going to change in the next decade or so. New studios will step in, and existing studios will fade into obscurity. I think Bethesda is at particular risk of losing a lot of popularity if they're not careful. I do not want them to fade into obscurity, but if they perform in the next decade, if they perform like they did in the last decade, they're probably going to make a lot of money, but they will lose a lot of fans. I don't want that to happen. Even though there's a fair amount of negative predictions in this video, I do think that this is an exciting time to be a fan of open world games. What features do you think are coming in the next open world games? And to avoid your mind being addled by a rogue AI, subscribe to the channel for your ticket into the Mike Redacted end of the world bunker.